My name is Mackenzie Elliott. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would file criminal charges against her own parents. But 3 days before my birthday, I discovered something that changed everything. $25,000 missing from my credit card, stolen by the people who were supposed to love and protect me the most. When I confronted them, my father's words still echo in my mind, "The family needed it more than you did." My mother just laughed and said, "You can celebrate alone. We had better plans." That's when I looked them both in the eye and said the words that would change our relationship forever. "Then don't ever call me again." They never expected what I did next. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late May, and I was sitting in my Boston apartment finalizing the details for what was supposed to be the best birthday celebration of my life. At 32, I had finally reached a point where I could afford to truly treat myself a weekend getaway to Nantucket with my closest friends, complete with an oceanfront rental and a private chef. I pulled out my premium rewards credit card, the one I'd worked so hard to qualify for, and logged into my account to check my available credit before making the final deposits. The page loaded, and my entire world collapsed in an instant. Available credit: $0. Current balance: $25,000. I stared at the screen, certain there had to be some mistake. My hands trembling, I scrolled through the recent transactions, each line item feeling like a physical blow. Nordstrom $3,246.78. Best Buy $4, 189.53. Bass Pro Shops $2, $875.22. Ticketmaster $1, $698.50. Marriott Hotels $4, $782.90. Apple Store $3, $899.989. None of these purchases were mine. I immediately called the credit card company, my voice shaking as I reported the unauthorized charges. "I see these charges were made with a physical card, not online transactions," the representative explained. "Our records show you have an additional card on this account registered to Diana Elliott. Would that be correct?" My blood ran cold. Diana Elliott, my mother. The emergency card I'd added to her digital wallet 2 years ago for absolute emergencies, only medical situations, car breakdowns in dangerous areas, with explicit instructions to call me first. "When did these charges begin?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The first charge appears to be from Bass Pro Shops last Thursday." Last Thursday. The day after I'd posted about my birthday trip plans on Instagram, excitedly sharing the budget I'd saved and how thrilled I was to finally treat myself properly. They had seen my happiness and decided to steal it. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back to my childhood in suburban Massachusetts. Growing up in the Elliott household meant living in a constant state of financial chaos, where money was always a source of tension and fear. My father, Frank Elliott, was a Vietnam veteran who had never properly addressed his PTSD. The war had left invisible scars that he tried to heal through what I now recognize as shopping therapy: expensive electronics we couldn't afford, tools he'd never use, anything that provided a momentary escape from his demons. He'd come home with bags full of purchases, his eyes bright with temporary joy that would fade within hours. My mother, Diana, had grown up in grinding poverty and was obsessed with projecting an image of success to our neighbors and friends. She'd learned early that appearances mattered more than reality, and she was willing to go into any amount of debt to maintain the illusion that our family was doing well. Designer purses bought on credit, expensive dinners at restaurants when our electricity was about to be shut off. This was the world I grew up in. Our house operated on a feast or famine cycle. One month, my parents would come home with a new entertainment system we absolutely couldn't afford. The next month, my mother would be crying at the kitchen table over past due notices, and I'd find myself eating cereal for dinner because there wasn't money for groceries. By age 13, I was working under-the-table jobs just to buy my own school supplies. By 16, I had learned to hide any cash I earned because money left visible in our house had a way of mysteriously disappearing. When I confronted my parents about my missing babysitting money, they never apologized. Instead, they'd say, "This is what families do for each other. Mackenzie, we help when someone needs it." But the help only flowed in one direction. College became my lifeline. While my friends had parents setting up college funds, mine were remortgaging our house for the third time. I applied for every scholarship available, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked 30 hours a week at a local cafe. I still remember my mother's reaction when my acceptance letter to Boston University arrived with a substantial scholarship offer. "Well, don't expect us to help with anything," she said, as if I'd ever made that assumption. I graduated with minimal student loans, which I paid off within 5 years through careful budgeting and building my event planning business from the ground up. The irony wasn't lost on me that I made my living creating memorable celebrations for others, while my own childhood birthdays were often forgotten or canceled due to whatever financial emergency was happening that week. As my career flourished and I established myself as one of Boston's premier corporate event planners, something shifted in my relationship with my parents. They went from dismissing my achievements to suddenly taking a keen interest in my comfortable lifestyle. The requests for small loans began around my 27th birthday. A few $100s here, $1,000 there, always attached to some urgent emergency and promises to repay that never materialized. "Just until payday," my father would say with that same desperate look I remembered from childhood. "We'd do the same for you," my mother would add, conveniently forgetting that they'd never been in a position to help anyone. The breaking point came 2 years ago when I lent them $3,000 for what they claimed were essential home repairs. The next week, I saw Facebook photos of them at a luxury casino resort, my mother posing with cocktails by the pool while my father grinned beside a poker table. When I confronted them, they accused me of keeping score and being selfish with family. That's when I established clear boundaries. I would help with true emergencies only, and there would be no more direct cash transfers. But I made one final concession that I now realize was my biggest mistake. I added my credit card to their phones for absolute emergencies, medical situations, car breakdowns in dangerous areas with explicit instructions to call me first. My therapist, Dr. Abrams, warned me that even this was leaving the door open for potential abuse, but I couldn't imagine that my own parents would risk our already fragile relationship for money. I needed to believe they had some line they wouldn't cross. I was devastatingly wrong. After discovering the charges, I tried calling my parents repeatedly. No answer. My texts went unread. They were deliberately avoiding me, and I knew why. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that transaction list scrolling endlessly through my mind. By morning, I'd made my decision. I took the day off work, something I rarely did, and drove the 2 hours to Springfield. This wasn't a conversation for phone calls or texts. I needed to see their faces when they tried to explain why they thought it was acceptable to steal $25,000 from their own daughter. The house looked exactly the same as always modest ranch style, with peeling paint and an unkempt lawn. But there was something new in the driveway that made my stomach clench. A brand new Ford F-150, gleaming silver with temporary tags. Another purchase made with my money. I knocked instead of using my key. This wasn't a family visit. This was a confrontation with people who had stolen from me. My mother answered. Her surprise at seeing me quickly masked with an overly bright smile. "Mackenzie! What a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you until after your big birthday trip." She hugged me as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't maxed out my credit card just days earlier. I remained stiff in her embrace. "Is Dad home?" I asked flatly. "In the living room. Come in. Come in. Want some coffee?" The casual normality was surreal. I followed her into the living room, where my father sat watching a baseball game on what looked like a significantly larger television than they'd had during my last visit. "Look who stopped by," my mother announced cheerfully. My father glanced up. "Hey, kiddo, what brings you all the way out here? Thought you'd be busy with birthday planning." I remained standing despite my mother's gestures toward the couch. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. "I'm here about my birthday. Actually, specifically, about how I discovered my credit card is maxed out with $25,000 in charges I didn't make." The room went completely silent. My mother's smile faltered, but didn't disappear entirely. My father's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I spoke with the credit card company," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "All the charges were made with the emergency card I gave Mom for emergencies only." My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, that I was going to tell you about that. There was a misunderstanding with the digital wallet thing. I thought I was using our card for Nordstrom purchases, for concert tickets, for a hotel reservation." I scrolled through the screenshots on my phone. "And I suppose Dad also accidentally used the wrong card at Bass Pro Shops and for the down payment on that new truck outside." My father shifted in his recliner, his jaw tightening. "Look, we were going to sort it out. It's not like we weren't going to tell you. When after you'd spent even more after my birthday had passed and the trip I've been saving for was ruined." My mother's fake smile finally dropped. "Don't be so dramatic, Mackenzie. It's just money. We needed a few things. A few $25,000 worth of things that you needed more than I needed my own savings, more than I needed to celebrate my birthday." My father sat forward, his face flushing red. "About that, we were thinking your trip seems a bit excessive. All that money for just a weekend, that's irresponsible." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. They had committed credit card fraud against me, and now they were lecturing me about financial responsibility. "You stole from me," I said, my voice quieter now, which somehow made the words land harder. "You committed credit card fraud. You stole $25,000 from your own daughter." My father's face turned deep crimson. "Now you listen here, we raised you. We put clothes on your back and food in your mouth for 18 years. If we needed to borrow some money—" "Borrow?" I interrupted. "You didn't ask. You didn't borrow. You stole." I pulled up another screen on my phone. The credit card company sent me a complete transaction history. There have been smaller charges over the past year, hundreds here, 1,000 there. I always assumed those were my purchases since they were at local stores I shop at. But they weren't, were they? You've been stealing smaller amounts all along, hoping I wouldn't notice." Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this to me? I've helped you when you needed it. I've given you money when you asked. Why steal from me?" My father stood up abruptly, his face now a dangerous shade of red. "The family needed it more," he snapped, his voice rising. "Your mother and I have been struggling while you're off planning fancy parties and taking luxury trips. What kind of daughter flaunts her money while her parents can barely make ends meet?" "I earned that money," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Every single dollar. I worked for it. I saved for it. It's mine to spend how I choose." My mother laughed, then a cold, bitter sound I'd heard too many times growing up, usually when she was dismissing my feelings or boundaries. "You can celebrate alone," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, showing off a new manicure that had undoubtedly been charged to my card. "We had better plans. That trip was selfish anyway. Family comes first. Mackenzie, we raised you better than that." In that moment, something crystallized for me. I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life, not as the flawed but well-meaning parents I'd spent years making excuses for, but as people who genuinely believed they were entitled to everything I had, people who saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a resource to exploit. A strange calm washed over me. I straightened my shoulders and looked them both in the eye. "Then don't ever call me again," I said quietly. They both stared at me, momentarily stunned by my tone. "Don't be ridiculous," my mother finally said. "You're overreacting. It's just money. We're family." "Not anymore," I replied, turning toward the door. "I've disputed the charges as fraud. The credit card company has opened an investigation. They have all the evidence, including your social media posts showing off your purchases." My father stepped toward me, his expression suddenly anxious. "Now wait a minute. Mackenzie, let's not be hasty. We can work something out." "There's nothing to work out," I said, my hand on the doorknob. "You stole from me. You betrayed me. And you're not even sorry." "Of course we're sorry you're upset," my mother said quickly. "We should have talked to you first, but you're not sorry you did it," I finished for her. "You're only sorry you got caught." I walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. But as I sat in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, a terrible thought occurred to me. If they were willing to steal from me, what else might they have done that evening? Back in my apartment, I logged into every financial account I could think of that might have any connection to my family, and then I found it the joint savings account I'd helped set up for my 16-year-old sister Sarah's college fund. The account that should have had nearly $15,000 was down to $847. With trembling fingers, I called Sarah at her friend's house. "Mackenzie," her voice was small and worried, "I was going to call you. The college counselor said something weird about my scholarship applications, something about my savings account being under review for financial aid calculations. I don't understand what that means." My heart shattered into a million pieces. "Sarah, honey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Have Mom and Dad said anything to you about your college money?" "They said there was some paperwork issue with the bank, but that it would be fixed soon. They told me not to worry about it." Her voice got even smaller. "Mackenzie, is something wrong?" I closed my eyes, feeling physically sick. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had stolen from their own minor daughter, jeopardizing her entire future for their shopping sprees and luxury weekend. "Sarah, I need you to pack a bag. I'm coming to get you tonight." What's happening? "I'll explain everything when I get there, but you're staying with me for a while." This wasn't just about my money anymore. They had crossed every possible line, and I was done protecting them from the consequences of their actions. The next morning, I sat across from Linda Perkins, a financial attorney who specialized in family fraud cases. Linda was in her 50s, with kind but steely eyes that spoke of someone who had seen too much family betrayal. "I was where you are about 10 years ago," she said after I explained my situation. "My ex-husband did something similar, not as much money. But the betrayal feels the same. The hardest part isn't the financial damage. It's accepting that people who claim to love you are capable of hurting you so deliberately." Within 2 hours, I had filed a police report. Officer Martinez was matter-of-fact as he took my statement, which helped me maintain my composure. "Credit card fraud is a serious offense," he explained as I signed the formal complaint. "The fact that the perpetrators are family members doesn't change that legally. With the amount of money involved and the evidence you have, the prosecutor will likely pursue felony charges." I also took immediate action to protect both Sarah and myself. I canceled every automatic payment I'd set up for their bills, cell phone, internet, streaming services. I notified the mortgage company that I would no longer be making co-signer payments. I placed fraud alerts on all 3 credit bureaus. I changed every password, security question, and contact information on every account I owned. I moved Sarah into my spare bedroom and enrolled her in the local high school. I sent a certified letter to my parents' address, officially terminating any financial relationship. That evening, I drafted an email to my entire extended family. I knew my parents would immediately begin spinning a narrative that painted them as victims and me as a vindictive daughter. I wanted the truth out there first. Dear family, I'm writing to inform you of a situation before you hear a distorted version from other sources. My parents have committed credit card fraud against me, stealing $25,000. They have also depleted Sarah's college savings account. I have filed a police report and am severing all financial ties with them. I understand they may reach out to you for help or to present their version of events. You are free to form your own opinions, but these are the facts. I am taking necessary steps to protect myself and Sarah after years of financial exploitation. I hope you can respect my decision. Mackenzie. I hesitated for only a moment before hitting send, knowing this would burn bridges far beyond just my parents, but at least the truth would be out there. 2 weeks later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. Mackenzie, you need to get to Springfield General immediately. Your father's had a heart attack. Despite everything, despite the theft, the lies, the complete lack of remorse, I found myself rushing to the hospital. Sarah insisted on coming with me. I found my father in the cardiac ICU, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. Machines beeped around his bed, and my mother sat beside him with red, swollen eyes. "Mackenzie," she whispered when she saw me. "Thank God you came. The doctors say the stress brought this on." The implication hung heavy in the air. This was my fault. My father's eyes opened when he heard my voice. "Mackenzie," he said weakly, "I didn't want things to go this far. We just needed some help." For a moment, just a moment, my old conditioning kicked in. The familiar guilt, the voice in my head saying maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe I should drop the charges and find another way to handle this. Then Dr. Peterson, his cardiologist, asked to speak with me privately. "Your father's condition is serious, but very treatable," she explained in the hallway. "However, I want you to understand something important. This heart attack wasn't caused by one recent stressor. It's the result of years of poor diet, lack of exercise, smoking, and chronic stress related to ongoing financial problems. One recent event didn't cause this." I looked back through the ICU window at my father's bed, where my mother was leaning over him, whispering urgently. Even now, even here, they were plotting their next move. I went back into the room, kissed my father's forehead gently, and whispered, "I love you, Dad, but I can't save you from the consequences of your own choices anymore." As Sarah and I left the hospital, she took my hand. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I know it's hard, but you did the right thing." At 17, she was wiser than I had been at 30. 6 months later, I stood in a Suffolk County courtroom, my hand raised as I swore to tell the truth. The courtroom was packed with family members, most of whom hadn't spoken to me since my email went out. Some were there to support me. Others had clearly chosen sides. Sarah sat in the front row, offering silent support. Now a senior in high school with a full scholarship to Boston University lined up. She had thrived in the stability of living with me. The prosecutor, Ms. Chen, had built a meticulous case. The evidence was overwhelming detailed transaction records, social media posts showing my parents flaunting their purchases, witness statements from store employees who remembered their unusual spending spree, and my testimony about the long pattern of financial abuse. When I took the stand, I spoke clearly and calmly about my childhood, the pattern of financial exploitation, and the impact of their actions not just on me, but on Sarah. "Your Honor," I said, looking directly at the judge, "this case isn't really about the money, though $25,000 is significant. It's about respect and boundaries. It's about the fact that love doesn't give someone the right to take whatever they want from another person. It's about protecting my sister from experiencing the same financial abuse I endured for years. My father's court-appointed attorney tried to paint me as vindictive and greedy, suggesting that family disputes should be handled privately, but the evidence spoke for itself. When my parents took the stand, they continued to justify their actions. My father insisted they had borrowed the money with full intention to pay it back. My mother claimed they had a misunderstanding about the emergency card's purpose. Neither showed genuine remorse. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Walsh, was clearly unimpressed. "Mr. and Mrs. Elliott," she said during sentencing, "you have violated the most basic trust that should exist between parents and children. You've stolen not just money, but your daughter's sense of security and your younger daughter's educational future. The court finds your lack of accountability deeply troubling." Day. The sentence: 2 years of supervised probation, full restitution to both Sarah and me, mandatory financial counseling, and a restraining order preventing them from contacting either of us for the duration of their probation. As we left the courthouse, my mother turned to me one last time. "I hope you're satisfied," she said bitterly. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I replied quietly. Sarah's hand in mine. "I've protected what was left of it." The year that followed was both the most difficult and most liberating of my life. The consequences were real and sometimes painful. My credit score took a significant hit when my parents defaulted on their mortgage payments, just as Linda had warned me it would. Some extended family members cut contact entirely, unable to understand how I could turn against my parents. A few family friends made pointed comments about forgiveness and the importance of family loyalty. But there were unexpected positives that far outweighed the difficulties. Sarah flourished in a stable environment, maintaining her grades and developing into a confident young woman who understood the value of healthy boundaries. My business actually grew as I began offering financial empowerment workshops for young adults, turning my painful experience into a way to help others recognize and escape financial abuse. Most importantly, I continued my work with Dr. Abrams, processing the complex grief that comes with family estrangement. "You're not just mourning the parents you lost," she explained during one session. "You're mourning the parents you never had, the ones you wished they could have been. My chosen family, Jessica, Marcus, and my other real friends stepped up in ways my biological family never had. They celebrated my successes without expecting to profit from them, offered support without strings attached, and never once suggested that I should just forgive and forget for the sake of family peace. On my 33rd birthday, I finally made it to Nantucket. The oceanfront house was everything I'd dreamed of, but what made it perfect wasn't the private chef or the sunset views. It was being surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported me. As we gathered on the deck for dinner, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jessica raised her glass. "To Mackenzie," she said, her voice carrying over the sound of the waves, "who taught us all that real strength sometimes means walking away from people who refuse to treat you with basic respect." "To boundaries," added Marcus, "and the courage to enforce them even when it's heartbreaking." "To chosen family," I replied, raising my own glass. "And to the peace that comes from surrounding yourself with people who truly see your worth." Later that night, alone on the deck after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I turned 33. 1 year ago, I thought my life was falling apart when I discovered my parents had stolen from me. Now I understand it was actually falling into place. That theft was the catalyst I needed to finally break free from a lifetime of financial and emotional exploitation. I've learned that family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect and genuine care. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can release my anger without allowing the same people to continue hurting me. Most importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't determined by how much I give to others, but by the standards I set for how I allow myself to be treated." Hey, Sarah, now thriving in her freshman year at Boston University, had texted me earlier, "Happy birthday to the sister who saved my life. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." As I finish writing this story, my parents have completed their court-ordered probation and financial counseling. According to their probation officer, They attended every required session but remained defensive and resistant throughout the process. They've never acknowledged wrongdoing or expressed genuine remorse. The restraining order has expired, but I haven't heard from them. Perhaps they've finally accepted that actions have consequences. Perhaps they're planning another approach, another manipulation. It no longer matters to me. I've built a life surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. My business continues to grow. My relationship with Sarah is stronger than ever, and I found peace in the knowledge that I chose my own well-being over enabling destructive behavior. Some people might see my story as tragic, a daughter forced to sever ties with her parents, family relationships irreparably broken. But I see it as a story of liberation, not a loss, but a reclamation of my worth, my boundaries, and ultimately, my life. To anyone reading this who sees their own story reflected in mine, you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions, crises, or financial problems, even if they're family. Love without respect isn't love. It's exploitation, wearing a prettier mask. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's essential self-care. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop protecting others from the natural consequences of their actions. Your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice or how much abuse you can endure. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not one-sided obligation. Family is what you make it. Choose people who choose you back, who celebrate your successes without envy, who support your growth without expecting payment, and who would never dream of exploiting your love for their own gain. The journey isn't easy. There will be guilt, doubt, and moments when you question every decision. But on the other side of those difficult choices lies something invaluable, the peace that comes from living authentically, the strength that comes from honoring your own worth, and the joy that comes from being surrounded by people who truly see and value you. Sometimes, to find your real family, you have to let go of the family you were born into, and sometimes that's the greatest gift you can give yourself.